All right, thank you, Vivian. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to come to this community meeting for the Woodridge Solar Special Use Permit proposals. My name is Scott Clark. I'm with the Albemarle County Community Development Department, and I'm the coordinating reviewer for the review of the special use permit request. And go ahead and share my screen here real quick. So before I get started tonight, I just want to quickly lay out how this meeting will run. I will take just a few minutes to do a very brief presentation about the county's processes in reviewing special use permits like this one. Then the applicants will have some time to present you more details about the proposal. And then we'll end the meeting with a Q&A section where you can provide your input or ask questions that you need answers to. And we'll take it from there. So I will go ahead and jump into the introductory portion for just a minute here. So this is a community meeting. The purpose tonight is to share information about this proposed project, how the process works, and to solicit public input on the project. We are fairly early in the review process, so this is not a decision-making meeting. This is an input meeting. And we just want to hear everyone's concerns and questions. So our review of special use permits is rooted in the comprehensive plan. The plan is a policy document that establishes a 20-year vision for the county. And it tells us how we should make land use decisions like this one and many others. Now, the area in this that this project is located in the county's rural areas under the comprehensive plan. And you can see here, there's an overarching goal to have thriving farms and forests, traditional crossroads communities, protected scenic areas and historic sites, and preserve natural resources. Under that, we've got multiple goals and objectives about how we should do that and what's important to the county in the rural areas. So that is the overarching land use policy that's relevant to a proposal like this one. Zoning is the legal tool that defines what is permitted in any given district. So like many other places, the county groups areas of land into zones or zoning districts to define what kinds of land uses are permitted in those areas. In this case, we're talking about the RA or Rural Areas Zoning District. Under any district in the zoning ordinance, there are two kinds of uses. There are by right uses, which you can go ahead and do, usually with a building permit or something like that, but it's permitted to be done. Then there are uses that are permitted by a special use permit. In other words, the Board of Supervisors can decide whether or not a use can be permitted based on its specific impacts to its surrounding area. I'll give you a little bit more information about how these special use permit applications work. So what's called a legislative review. In other words, it can only be acted upon by elected officials. For a special use permit, the application is reviewed by county staff and other agencies who provide feedback and recommendations to the applicants. And then there are two public hearings, the first with the Planning Commission and the second with the Board of Supervisors. The board makes the final decision on whether or not to approve a use and what conditions will be applied to it. No matter where it's located, every special use permit is reviewed against a set of consistent criteria from our zoning ordinance. You can see the four of them here. No substantial detriment. The character of the area is unchanged. Harmony with the purposes and intent of the chapter, with the uses permitted by right, and with the public health, safety, and general welfare. And finally, consistency with the comprehensive plan. And again, for this area, that consistency would be with those goals and objectives set forward for the rural areas of the county. So how does development happen in Albemarle County? An application like this. This is a map of the overall process from left to right. You start with the legislative review, which is the board approval or not of the proposed use. If and when that happens, you move on to the site design review, the site plan, which is a staff review in most cases, and that's a separate process after the legislative review. And then finally, there's the site design and construction steps, which involve zoning clearances and building permits. To give you an overall idea, we're about there in the process where that arrow is. So we're quite early on, and this is a good point to get input and questions for the people who live in the area to find out what those concerns are. And finally, just give you a timeline. We received the application back in the middle of May. Staff will be getting review comments and responses out to the applicants on July 18th. The public hearings for the commission and the board have not been scheduled yet. It typically wouldn't happen until the applicant has had a chance to revise their application and get it in the final shape for review by the planning commission. So if you have any questions when we're done today, either about the process or the timing of those hearings, here's my email address, sclark@albemarle.org, and please feel free to contact me anytime you like to ask for questions about this project or about planning in general. So I will stop sharing at this point and turn it over to the applicants to introduce themselves and give you information about the project itself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming tonight. My name is Valerie Long. I'm with Williams Mullen, and we are assisting the applicant, Hexagon Energy, with this application or these applications. I just wanted to introduce our team, and then we're going to let Scott Reamer from Hexagon take it over. So again, we have Scott Reamer from Hexagon. I think many of you have met him already. Hopefully, you have all received letters from him. He is the project manager with Hexagon, and he's going to be handling most of the discussion tonight. And we also have Megan Nadostup, who is a land use planner with our firm here. So three of us are working on it. We also have several representatives from Timmins Engineering on with us, Craig Kotarski and Rick Thomas. They may need to be added as panelists if they haven't been yet, but we'll go ahead and get started, and I will let Scott take it over from here.
Thanks, Valerie. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Scott Reamer. Let's see, quick background. Who am I? I moved to Albemarle about 10 years ago to do a doctorate in systems engineering here at UVA and fell in love with the area. My wife and I live in Crozet now with our 9-month-old son. So we're in the area, live in the area, and love the area. Really excited tonight to take a few minutes to introduce to you this Woodridge solar project. By quick way of introduction of who Hexagon is as a company, we're a small team of about 20. Our office is on the downtown mall. We've been operating for about 7 years now. Our CEO, Matt Hansman, has been involved in the green energy game for about 20 years now and has been instrumental in several of the companies. We've got a bit of a renewable energy hub here in Charlottesville, and he was instrumental in helping build that. I was really lucky to get to jump onto the team after grad school and be part of it. And I've been working largely across the U.S., especially in the Northeast in Maine and Massachusetts, but was thrilled to get the opportunity to come down here and work on this Woodridge project. So my goal tonight is pretty much to provide it's a formal context, but to provide an informal conversation about what the project is, explain it to you, what our intent with it is, but then also to hear your feedback. As Mr. Clark was mentioning earlier, we're in the beginning of a process here, and there's a lot of time for community feedback and a lot of time for conversation. And I want to make myself available to you guys. I'm grateful for Valerie and Megan here. They know that slide that Scott was just showing about the detailed process of zoning process here. It's complicated, and they know that well and have been reliable guides to it so far. So I'm grateful for their support, and I'm thankful for you guys' time. So with that, I'll jump into the some information about the Woodridge Solar Project. All right, our goal, overarching a purpose with this, is to work on two fronts. Green energy is really important to our clean economy, to removing carbon from the atmosphere, fighting climate change, et cetera, et cetera. We're all familiar with the narrative around how fast and how quickly we need to get more clean energy on the grid. That said, one of the balancing pieces to that is how do we get land use right, and how do we make sure that we preserve the trade-off or maximize trade-offs in terms of what we do with a piece of property. And this project I'm really excited about because I think it does both. It's a dual action project. It produces clean power for up to 25,000 homes, or about 60,000 residents in this county. But it also couples that with a strong environmental restoration aspect as well. This is not a prime piece of farmland or a prime piece of forest land that we're going to be destroying to be able to put these panels in. In fact, we're dealing with a very highly degraded site that's been industrially timbered for about 80 years in various chunks. And we'll take a look at some of those maps in a second. But the goal here is that by putting this solar array in for a period of about 35 years, it's going to give the land a chance to rest. It's going to help the soil infiltration improve. And so very happy to be working on this on two fronts. The nameplate capacity of this project is 138 megawatts. That, I'm sure everybody knows it, but to kind of put that in perspective, the old 100-watt light bulb would be 100 watts. This is 138 million watts. And so that's sort of how you can think about what this megawatt means. In terms of acreages, this is a big project, relatively big project compared to what Albemarle County has worked on before. This is the largest that the county that's been proposed in the county. I will say it's not the largest in the state by any means. There are several, or at least a few, that are 4 to 5 times larger than this one. So this isn't out of keeping with what's actually going on within the rest of the state, but it is the largest that the county's seen so far. When you see that 2,300 acre number that's actually spread across 9 different parcels. That 2,300 acres is under common ownership. Those 9 parcels are under common ownership by the J.D. Purcell Land Holdings Group. They're a timber team, a local group that owns a lot of property across the state. It's one contiguous 2,300 acre set of parcels that have been for 80 years industrially timbered. The total project area that we're proposing having any sort of impact on is going to be 1,500 acres of that. And what that means is setbacks and spacings and where the panels are and where the fences are and where the substation is proposed to go and where we're going to plant a new grassland and meadow area. That whole situation sums up to about 1,500 acres. Of that, within that area, only 650 acres will be fenced in for panels. The rest of it is going to be open land that is either forested or replanted in meadow conditions with bee and butterfly friendly pollinators. Within that 650 acres, there's really only about 200 acres of panel space itself. So if you summed up the surface area of all of the panels and put them together, it would be about 200 acres. As I mentioned, this is power for about 25,000 homes. This is going to connect to some power lines that run right through the site. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then that power is going to flow right through into our area. So it's pretty exciting to have a large project sited near a load. The demand for power, this project is sited right beside it. When you look at that 1,500 acres versus the 650 acres and notice that difference, you might wonder, well, what's that difference? Why are you saying you're going to impact 1,500 but only put fence around 650? That's because there's shading setbacks, there's stormwater management features, there's other areas that just need to be restored where we're going to plant bee and butterfly friendly plants around these areas, restore meadows that have a deep-rooted system that help foster infiltration of the rainwater into the soil and improve it. Likewise, that new meadow area that we're going to establish is going to foster and help wildlife, plant life, pollinators, etc. throughout. And we can talk at length about that. I'm happy to provide some more comment. Again, I mentioned this 80 plus years of industrial timbering. Move on to the next slide here. Another thing that I'd ask you to go with me as we talk through this is, I've been doing this for a little while now, and I feel like what we've done is tried to put together a project that, to the best of our ability, really respects the community and respects the area and goes above and beyond what's required. As a developer, I have a mandate or a job basically to make something that's financeable and bankable that various financing parties can sign off on and say, yes, this is industry standard. Yes, we have technology to do that. While at the same time making sure that fits well with the community's needs and what the community would want. And so what we put together is, I think, a very good baseline bankable project. the county requirements, the county codes would require that we stay between 25 and 75 feet off of all property lines. What I wanted to do right from the get-go, because I want to make sure people's view sheds are preserved, is said, no, let's go ahead and just make that 200 feet off right off the bat. So there will be no panel, no fence, nothing except natural growing plants, which I'll talk about in a little bit within that 200-foot buffer. Yeah, so of that 200-foot buffer, the first 100 feet will either be existing natural growth that we won't touch or replanted pines that are going to be replanted anyway based on the timbering use of the property. We'll make sure, another thing, we've done a detailed wetlands delineation of the site with a group called Wild Ginger out of Scottsville. Nicola McGough there did this for us and did a really good job. What that helps us know is where streams, wetlands, any sort of environmentally sensitive habitats are. Underneath both county code and state law, we have to stay over 100 feet away from all of those delineated wetlands. And by that, I mean, we nothing that the project does can touch it. If you'd at some point be willing to come on a site tour with me, I think I could show you that the current usage of the property has not provided that 100-foot buffer setback for many of these streams and wetlands. So this is a chance that we have for this very large piece of property to really help restore these wetland buffers. And, separate to the project in other ways, I'm actually looking into other means of restoring wetlands, restoring streams throughout. But even just by setting off 100 feet for the life of this project is going to help them be restored. The property has, in addition to being timbered, it's historically been hunted by the Woodridge Sportsmen's Association, who have a headquarters right on the site. As I mentioned, only 650 acres of this site is going to be used for solar panels and will be fenced. That whole rest of the area is going to remain open and able to be hunted by them. So we won't be removing any of their recreational or hunting ability from there. Another thing to keep in mind with this is a way to preserve the nature of the community, because these things are very quiet and they're very low. They're not tall. They're not like a windmill. They're not like a concentrated solar power plant that they use out west. These are at max 10 feet, usually about 8 feet off the ground at the max tilt. This will preserve this land from going into suburban development and requiring extra county services, increasing traffic in the area. This is a great way to, in my opinion, to preserve this area. One other thing I'd like to talk about, and maybe if you would join me on a tour at some point, you could see, there's a lot of scouring and erosion happening at the site right now. That basically means that when it rains, channels start to form. These channels have formed. When it rains, water goes into those channels, pull sediment with them down into Turkey Run, the creek right on the site, and continue to fill it up. And unfortunately, it just keeps getting worse and worse until something is done to stop it. This project is an opportunity to help stop that. I'd probably take in 15 site drives with various people from around the county. I have a truck that can handle the kind of the rough terrain back there. And if anybody is interested at any point to actually go out and see what we're talking about, please just contact me. I'd be thrilled to take you. That's a big summary of what we're doing. Now I'm going to kind of get into a little bit more detail about things and talk through. Thank you. And we'll try to move pretty quickly. I don't want to take all night, but I want to make sure we get enough of a detailed summary here for everybody. One of the things that I mentioned is that we do really want to make sure that this fits with the character of the community and keeps neighbors top of mind. As you may have noticed if you've driven past the site, it has been recently, a large portion of it has recently been logged, and it's not in the best shape. I've heard somebody compare it to Mordor, I think, already. So it's in pretty rough shape. And what I want to see is, from that baseline, what can we do to make it better and make sure this works well? One of the ways that that's going to happen is once this is built, and construction will have some more traffic. I'll speak to that in a second. But once this is built, there's going to be virtually no traffic. You'll have approximately 1 or 2 vehicles per month coming out to the site to maintain it and make sure it works. Unless we do some sheep farming, which I'll speak to in a moment, which that may increase a little bit, but that would just be a little bit more of agricultural traffic. So we'll get to that in a second. One of the things I wanted to say was, this 200-foot voluntary setback with a 100-foot buffer of trees, extra tall meadow grass behind it, low profile installation. What we're currently doing right now to try and provide a little bit more detail to you as the community, to the county, even for our own sake, is we started off a traffic study, a detailed traffic study, to make sure that as any of these panels are brought in, panels and racking systems are brought into the array, that we make sure we do that at appropriate hours. We make sure that the the roads stay clean, that there's appropriate flaggers at different points to make sure that traffic is handled well. The construction period would be for about 12 to 18 months total. So that just broad timeline, so you can kind of have an idea. And I'll talk more in detail about this, but assuming we go through this whole process that Mr. Clark outlined earlier, and get a permit with the community, with the county, we'll then go to the state for a more detailed, it's called a permit by rule with the Virginia DEQ, to make sure we conform with every single environmental law that the state has on the books. We'll also begin a site design with and review with the county. That'll take a good little while. The soonest that any construction on this could happen would be, I mean, I could say it would be next summer, but more likely it would be into the fall or even early the next year. So there's a little bit of timing flexibility. That would be very, very fast. I don't anticipate that it'll actually move that quickly, but that would be the soonest. In terms of where the project's located, here's a map of Albemarle County up in the northern, let me grab a little laser pointer here. Here's Charlottesville. The project is located north of Scottsville, close to the Albemarle-Fluvanna line, right along Secretary's Road, right here. There's the Woodridge Country or Woodridge Market located right here. The site is interior to this area. This is some recent satellite imagery of what the property actually looks like. Now, the green outlines are those 9 parcels that I was talking about that all together sum up to that 2,300 acres. I'll show you shortly the overlay of the panels and where they'll be. All of this is one contiguous tract under common ownership by the Purcell brothers, except I would point out one exception here. This interior portion along Secretary's Road is owned by various landowners. So there's several residences along the line. That's why you'll notice there's a line in the timber clearing right here as compared to right here, because this piece of property is owned by a local resident who I've actually gotten to speak with, and I'm grateful for her input. This area is all owned by the Purcells and has been actively timbered. That's the parcel boundary. That is the 2,300 acre site when you hear about that. Now, before going into more detail, yeah, so actually, first some site photos. You've heard me talk about how this site is degraded and in pretty rough shape. It's been timbered recently. This is along one of the power line easements. Our proposed point of connecting to the power lines is in the southern part of the site, right here. And this, you can see, is kind of a barren stretch where the trees have been cleared. This is an interior roadway. You can start to see a lot of that channeling that I was talking about running through. People often ask about this kind of thing because the project will require some grading. What about topsoil? Are you going to harm the topsoil biome? Well, this is what the topsoil looks like right now. It's in rough shape. What we're talking about doing is a chance to actually restore that. It's another roadway with some scouring right through the middle of it. And this is actually a hill seen from one of these roads, actually from this road off in the other direction, where you can see a large amount of just continuous channels running. Those are pulling dirt right off of those hills, taking them down into the creeks, running off into all the rivers downstream. It's not a great site right now. And so whatever we can do to help restore it is going to actually be great for the aquatic health of the whole area and community. Here's a few more pictures. We did a drone flight out in the area. You can just sort of, this was in the middle of winter. You can see all the hardwoods have their trees off right here. This is just to show what it looks like aerialing. This is another channel scour. This is, should you opt to join me for a site tour, will be your chariot in my red truck right here. So I'd be happy to go out with you. Before we go in and I show you the actual proposed site layout, I just wanted to take a second and talk through sort of an anatomy of a solar array, because people hear about these things and they think big industrial use and they think paving and getting rid of existing vegetation and harming and damaging the whole area and making the land unusable. While I understand how one might get there initially, I think the reality is actually a little bit more benign. And my goal here is to show what that would actually look like. This is a solar array. We didn't build this as a company. This was built back about 5 years ago, I believe. But you can drive up to it. It's in Shannon Hill, which is a couple stops east of Zion Crossroads down 64. It's right off 64 right there. This is a 5 megawatt array. So the one we're proposing is 138. This is notably smaller than the one that we're proposing, but it's the same exact layout, same exact kind of idea. What you have is, obviously you have your access road right here, which is a gravel driveway. The only concrete that's going to be poured on the site is for these inverters to sit on. Those are going to be, I think they're about 12 by 20 pads. It varies a little bit depending on the size layout, but no bigger than that. Those inverters collect the power from the various panels, put them together, and then they pump them off into the grid. They change it from direct current into alternating current so that it can connect to the grid. That's the only in-ground concrete that's associated with these projects. Each subarray of about this size will have its own inverter. So you'll have a few of these scattered throughout the site. These are also the only items and units that generate noise on the site. And by noise, I should clarify, that's about the level of an air conditioning unit, an outdoor air conditioning unit. In our site layout in our array, every inverter is proposed to be within 500 feet or 500 feet off the property line, so that there will be no audible impact whatsoever. So that's the only concrete. You have a gravel driveway, then you have the panels and the racking systems themselves, which you can see right here. Here's a driveway, here's our inverters. Panels, in this case, they face south. This is a fixed tilt array, which I can talk more about fixed tilt versus trackers shortly. But you'll see that the actual ground footprint of the panels is not that notable, and there's also a lot of space between rows, so that you have grass growing between each row. There's plenty of room for vegetation to thrive, grow, and really to foster the soil throughout this whole process. So as we go and look at this next site plan, just keep in mind, basically what we're proposing is several small versions of this disjointed from each other to make sure that they respect all of those wetland boundaries and setbacks. So here, at long last, and I think many of you have seen this in the map that I sent you guys, here's what our proposed array looks like. This is the biggest that it would possibly look. We anticipate that it'll probably shrink somewhat based on panel advances by the time we actually are able to build this. But we wanted to make sure we made sure that we could meet that 138 megawatt nameplate capacity. Secretary's Road runs right through the middle of the site. All of the panels are set off 200 feet off of the property. That's where screening will go. As you can see, these are the streams that have been delineated. That's not all the wetlands shown. You can see those in some of the more detailed maps that'll come up. We will not be touching any of this area. This area is going to be maintained for the landowner to continue doing what they want with it. It has a lot of wetlands and a lot of hills that just made it impractical to work with and also seemed more sensitive to protect. This area on the north, what I've been colloquially calling the mitten, is originally we had planned to have panels up in there, but we decided to remove those because this is a very hilly region. Also, the Monticello view shed runs directly south of that. So it clips right at the end. We decided, you know what, to try and keep things straightforward for everybody and not impact the however many visitors go to Monticello on a regular basis, we'll just remove those and downsize the site. And we've gone through this with Monticello. They've actually sent us a letter saying that they don't anticipate this having any impact on their view shed and that they're grateful for us having moved these panels out of the area. One thing I wanted to go back to real quick, I just realized I missed. On this anatomy of the solar array, the other thing is the fence. That's that 650 acres that I was talking about. So when you hear 650 acres, think it's this fence line. It's not all of these panels. It's not them all summed up. There's spacing within that 650 acres. That 1,500 acres actually includes all of this buffer space outside of it. Our site, because it's so many disjointed versions of these, has a lot of space between the different subarrays. And that's what goes into that 1,500. The great majority of that 1,500 acres is not fenced. It's not. It's really not impacted. It's actually just given a chance to rest from being timbered. So I just wanted to clarify that. This is the detailed site plan that we submitted to the county. Each of these blocks is a close-up of the different areas. And so we'll go through and take a look here really quickly at a couple of them. We'll start off looking at this south, well, it's more of a western corner. Start off looking there, and then we'll pop over and look at the proposed point of interconnection, which would require or will require us to build a substation interior to the site. We'll look at that. Then we'll look at this piece up at Secretary's Road. Once we go through that, I may have a couple other things to say, but then I actually am excited to be able to show you some visualizations. We've done some mock-ups of what this is going to look like at different periods of growth. So bear with me. I'll try and move through this as quickly as possible. This is that southern or that western corner, as I mentioned, of the array. This is the southern existing transmission line. We will be connecting to this transmission line a little bit to the southeast, and I'll show you that in the next slide. As you can see, the purple or the green areas are delineated wetlands. That's where the Wild Ginger crew went out to the site, walked around it, and made sure they were able to geotag where they all were. We got that in a map. From that, we set 100 feet off of all of those and made sure that our site array was not going to be impacted there, or would not be impacting any of those 100-foot buffers, which you can see right in this area. That 100-foot buffer is going to be given the chance to rest. Additionally, we're setting off generally 50 to 70 feet off of that again. Within this 100-foot buffer, trees can grow to whatever height. For solar, trees grow and cast shade. Solar doesn't do so well in shade. So what we did is added an additional 50 to 70 feet before we put any panels next to this so that the panels stay unshaded. These boxes that you see in this area are conceptual stormwater design features. When solar first started getting done across the state, people moved at it pretty quickly. It was kind of a fast and loose, loosey-goosey approach where stormwater was not particularly well thought of and well thought out, and there were some drainage issues that happened, and unfortunately really damaged the reputation of the industry. In many ways, they deserved what they got. They didn't think this through very well. Our goal has been to be both aggressive and progressive in our use of stormwater management features, which is why you see so many of these built throughout. The purple areas that you see are, we haven't done a formal topographical survey yet because it's a large site, but using county GIS data, which I believe is based off of Virginia's LIDAR data, these purple areas are steep slopes. Most of those steep slopes have been brought about from erosion and from this heavy intensive timbering over the years. And the project for any of the buildable area, any of these purple areas within the buildable area, we need to bring the slope of the site to about 15% in order for the panels to be able to fit. That's 15 feet drop for a 100 feet run. It's not super steep, but it's steep enough. If you tried to go on a run up one of the hills, you'll know it. It's more tolerant than most solar arrays are able to work with, but with emerging technologies, we feel confident that we'll be able to build on a 15% slope. In most places, if possible, we'll try to get it to 10, but our minimum is 15%. So within the buildable area, that is within the fence line, we'll need to do some grading to get some of these steep slopes handled. We've submitted as part of our application, a permit application for that. As you can see, this is the 200-foot buffer that I was talking about. In a second, I'll go into a lot more detail about what that buffer actually looks like. There's a fence inside of it. Here's the property line. I think Craig Katarski, our engineer at Timmins, who we've contracted with to really help us put the site plan together, which was no small lift. Craig Katarski is on the call, and I think he had a couple of words to add to this engineering design. So, Craig, I don't know if you're on and can speak.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
You all hear me? Okay. So, Scott, I think you've done a really good job of sort of describing the way that we've gone about it. And I think, really kudos to you guys, I think, as well, with also having sort of this, this focus on wanting to be environmentally friendly and be, thinking forward with regards to the impacts of the streams and such. But, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do and that we've done, at least at this point at a high level, is, study the land and make sure that we have an understanding that any of the grading that's done, that it can be done in a way that is sort of respectful in thinking about these buffers, as well as getting the program there with regards to the project as well. So to your point, the slopes will, or actually I should say the grading on the site, what it will allow us to do is actually repair some of the site and improve some of what is happening with regards to the way that water will run off of the site. So in some cases, we'll actually be able to reduce the slopes from what they are right now, as well as sort of repair a lot of those areas that have seen that rutting. and give essentially the stormwater will have more time actually in contact with the ground to sort of to get back to groundwater versus just running off of the site. And then in addition, one of the things that we'll also be needing to do, you spoke to the site plan process a little bit, or that being another step after the zoning. But at the site plan process, we'll also be addressing items like water quality, water quantity, and have to go through, sort of a rigorous process with the county, demonstrating how those items are being improved and, showing the calculations and so on and so forth. And then one other item I think is really important to think about, or for everybody to have an understanding of, you talked a little bit with regards to thinking about the traffic and how panels will be coming in and out of the site. One of the things we want to make sure that everybody's aware of is that any of the grading and any of the earthwork that would be done, it'll all be contained within the site. There won't be a need for dirt to come in or dirt to come out. It's a large amount of area, and by playing with grades and things of that nature, it'll be very straightforward and easy to ensure that the site is balanced overall.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, I appreciate the input. And one of the things I meant to mention earlier that I was really glad you hit on was that runoff from a site is natural. It occurs commonly in every site. Anytime we do a development anywhere or build anything, the water has to go somewhere. What we like to see for environmental stewardship is to see that as much water as possible seep into the ground. That recharges the water table, that helps foster soil health. It has a host of benefits. What we're seeing on the site right now, and back to the scour that I've talked about, is not groundwater seepage or not groundwater infiltration. We're seeing runoff, and runoff, naturally exists. That's why we have streams. They gather it. But at an unnatural rate, when an area has been, say, strip cleared for timber, for example, that water doesn't have time to slow down and soak into the ground. And it starts hitting those channels, it goes faster and faster, and it starts taking more and more dirt with it into the streams down below it. And so not only does the site itself degrade, all the streams down water of it also degrade. And so what we have with this is an opportunity. You may look at grading as a bad thing, or earthwork as a bad thing. In fact, what we have a chance to do here is bring these slopes out to a less intense grade so that the sheet flow across them slows down, and then replant it with a dense mix of grasses and pollinator-friendly plants that then really help that water slow down, infiltrate into the soil, and when it runs off into the stream, do so at a slower rate with a higher quality and less sedimentation in it. So that's one of the things I'm excited about this site for. Pivoting over to the next area, this is to go back really quick so you see where we're looking at. This is the southern portion of the array that we moved over to. We're going to connect to this existing power line, Dominion's existing power line right through here. This existing power line, I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning or not. This runs from the now decommissioned Bremo power plant in Fluvanna on the James. That is a coal-fired power plant that's been operating since the 30s. In I think the 2010s, they transformed it into a gas power plant, and it's now been completely decommissioned. This line runs through there and brought power up to Albemarle and the surrounding areas historically since the 1930s. Of course, I don't know all the details of the line, and utility history is its own thing, but generally that's been the case. That is now shut off. This solar project is an opportunity to backfill coal power with solar power. And in order to do that, we need to build a way to tap this line. That's where this substation comes in. That's basically going to be any substation you've ever driven past. Over by Whole Foods, there's a substation. That's effectively what we're talking about. There's in Crozet, where I live, there's a substation that they've just done a lot of work on. However, the nice thing about this is rather than being on near any public facing roads or having any visual impact, it's entirely interior to the site. And so we'll have no impact on anyone, but that's how we're going to get the power produced from the panels onto the grid. So just as a heads up how that works. This is, okay, one more time, bear with me on these fast slides. This is right up here along Secretary's Road, this final piece. It's sort of the northernmost panel that we put together. I have actually been made aware and wasn't aware from our wetlands delineation that there's some hardwood growth and some water in this area. So anticipate that we're going to be revising this panel layout right here in the corner a little bit. So bear with me as we get that updated for our future layout. There's a second power line that runs through the site. This is a larger, higher voltage power line. We're not going to be touching it, but just for awareness sake, it does run right through the middle of the northern portion of the site. I mentioned earlier the Woodridge Sportsmen's Association. There's a cluster of old houses right in this area that they use for kind of their headquarters, or at least several of their meetings. There's also an old graveyard. We've done a phase 1 historical, archaeological, and historical review of the site. There's a graveyard located right here. Originally, before we knew about those, we had panels in this area. Once we found that out, we removed them. So we're not going to impact any historical or archaeological features on the property, make sure that we stay set back. And the Hunt Club's going to maintain access to these buildings and to be able to continue to base their operations out of there. Island Drive is one of my favorite street names that I've ever run across, for just a side point there. So that is a quick look at kind of the detailed overview of the site. Now, a couple things really quick. Why this location? A few things. You need it when we look for a spot with a solar array. We look for an area that primarily two things, that has acceptable topography and not too many environmental features that would make it difficult to build on. That effectively it's a reasonably sloped and reasonably sloped site that we can actually set these panels on. Critical to that, though, is that there has to be access to power lines. This site has access to a power line. That is the primary reason why we're looking at it. Another plus of this one, though, is that because of how large it is, we're able to work those 200-foot buffers in while still providing a very large project, and that still affords those extensive buffers. Mentioned again, kind of hounding the commercial timber. Much of the site has actually been cleared because of its 25 to 35-year growth cycle. So we'll be just kind of stepping in and filling that and putting solar panels in instead of new pine trees. And then I just mentioned this Bremo coal gas power plant that we're actually backfilling for. Next question is why now? As I was saying, you can have the most perfect solar site in the world, but if it doesn't have access to the grid, and an ability to interconnect to the grid, you're up a creek without a paddle. There's a regional grid manager in Virginia where we're at, or most of Virginia, called PJM. Now that stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland. These are groups that were set up, I can't even remember too well, 60s, 70s, 80s, somewhere in there, late 20th century, to help manage various utilities grids to make sure, and it effectively forms a marketplace for power. This runs from west of Chicago to up through Pennsylvania, New Jersey, down to parts of northern North Carolina. And this marketplace has a lot of demand for solar power. That's part of why we're within it. In order to connect to that grid, you have to go through a pretty long and costly process. We've already been sitting in the queue to connect to it for about 3 years, since 2019. We were anticipating that was going to take us another 4 to 5 years because the grid manager is going through a complete overhaul. They've effectively frozen most projects. And so there's not going to be, there are some projects they got through earlier. We thought this project was going to be put on the back burner and take until 2026, 2027. Literally on Christmas Eve, I was checking my email and we were notified that this project is getting what they call fast track. It has a chance to get authorization to connect to the grid this summer, which is a really big deal. That's why we've run really quickly at this. I'm very grateful for Timmons and Williams Mullen's quick support on it to help us get this site plan put together, because it does have an opportunity to start removing or offsetting carbon from the atmosphere very quickly and start powering our area really well. Again, the really cool fact of this is that it's backfilling dirty old coal, and that's part of why we're actually able to move quickly, I think. And I'm by no means a grid expert. There are people who spend their whole careers on it, but my understanding is that by this open space left on the grid from that power plant dropping off, we're able to step in quickly and get fast track to actually be able to build this. So pretty cool on that. This is a picture of where the substation is proposed. This is the Dominion power line easement running right through here. This is the line that we'll connect to. And this is where our proposed substation will be with panels behind it. I've kind of hit on most of these throughout our conversation, so I'll go through it really quickly. But again, going to reduce 140,000 tons of CO2 per year, or equivalent power to 25,000 homes. Water usage, we're not going to need to pump in a bunch of water to clean these things in this area. There's enough rain to keep them clean on their own. There are no hazardous materials here. People wonder about that sometimes. People have these on their rooftops. They live near them. You know, the electrical current put out by these things is at any point no more, unless you're right at the power line, the large high voltage power line, it's no more than what you're going to have from the power lines running down your street and even running into your house. So there's no hazard there. As I mentioned, several hundred acres. I think it's about 400 acres of reestablished meadow, and then maybe 500 acres of restored wetlands. I'll have to look. I have those numbers somewhere, but it's notable. I'm not just saying hundreds just to wave my hands. It is a notable number that I can provide. As I mentioned, the wetlands are protected. The majority of these materials are recyclable, and what's very exciting is even within the last couple of months, extreme strides have been made to make these 100% recyclable. And so by the time we actually end up getting these things being ready to be decommissioned in 35 years, they should be able to be quickly recycled and put back into use. Native wildlife, plant life, pollinators to thrive. Exciting about that. Equivalent of 100 rail cars off the tracks for coal. Soil rests and rejuvenates. A couple things I didn't write out here yet, but that I'm excited about looking into. People often ask, well, you know, instead of mowing this site to maintain it, which is the standard practice, and that's what our current plan proposes, can you do any wildlife? Can you do any farming? Can you do any sheep or pasture-raised animals? The answer has been a tepid maybe for a long time, and it's still, but I'd say we're moving, thankfully, as an industry away from a tepid maybe to a tepid probably. And so I'm actually going to be talking very soon to a local sheep farmer and his operation who's interested in actually working with us to help graze the sheep on this site. Now, stay tuned. There's a lot of pieces that go into that. What I'm hoping to do is effectively say, that's what we aim to grow into. You know, before any sheep are going to be grazing here, we need to establish a good base of plantings underneath it. And that's going to take a couple of years before any sheep are really ready to move on to this. But the goal and the real opportunity that we have, and I wasn't aware of this sheep operation, it's right here in I think it's in Albemarle, maybe in Fluvanna, but it's very close. There's some opportunity to really foster some really cool regenerative use. And, you know, sheep are awesome because not only do they eat and help keep the grass down, not only does this farmer get paid to help maintain the site while raising sheep, when the sheep eat the grass, they poop it out, their hooves push it into the ground, the soil is even further regenerated. So this is a really cool opportunity that we're pursuing. I can't overcommit here because it's a big area. And so it's going to take a little bit before we're able to do the whole site by sheep. But we are looking at working that into and planning on working that into our site design. Benefits for the county, there will be a lot of jobs during construction, 250 plus, many millions of dollars in economic benefit through a few different payment structures. You know, not only will the underlying land use of the property change so that the real estate property taxes increase, there's also two different methods of tax payment, whether it be kind of and I'm not a tax expert here, and this is going to be something I have to talk about with the supervisors, but a payment per megawatt of power per year, or something of a revenue share agreement that gets set up. So very excited about that. This is powering approximately 20% of Albemarle's 2050 net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So it dovetails very nicely with Albemarle's climate action plan. I wish I would have remembered to include a slide about what that climate action plan is, but part of that plan is fostering green energy projects, working with local companies, offsetting our carbon footprint. So I'm very excited about that. Bear with me on the cheesy slide, but this is actually legitimately what we're proposing doing. This is the site currently. This is not even as good a version of the site as what we're proposing, because the plantering mix that we're proposing includes more bee and butterfly friendly sites. This was built before people really started incorporating those planting mixes into the site area. Now, you might, if you're like me, you'd sit here and say, okay, great, great. Okay, wonderful. So you're going to save the environment, which we all care about, we all want. But how does this impact me if I live in the neighborhood? What I care about is my view shed. And we're really trying to take that pretty seriously right off the bat. This is the site as you can see it. These are the proposed panel areas. These are the stormwater management features. It's a little bit hard to see. I'll zoom in a second, but you'll see these green lines along the edges. Those are proposed planter buffers. Earlier, I mentioned a 100-foot area. 100-foot of that 200-foot setback is going to be screening buffer, planted screening buffer, or natural screening buffer that either already exists or will be planted to grow up. Behind that, and that's not in that green area. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. That's not in the green area. That's everywhere across the entire site. There will be 100 feet of that. In the area where you see these green dots, right here, for example, so this is a close-up of those green dots, these green dots across much of the site area. That's going to be an additional planted evergreen and shrub mix to fast-growing evergreen shrub mix. I think we are planning on using eastern hemlock, although we're open to other screening ideas if you have them. I'll show you our mix here. This is a diagram of what that's going to look like. Here's the property line. There's 100 feet of total set, or 200 feet of total setback. 80 feet of that in any area where these green dots are shown, 80 feet of that is that natural growth of trees and natural vegetation or replanted trees and vegetation. Behind that, in the areas with the green dots, we'll plant a mix of evergreen shrubs and or evergreen trees and shrubs. And you can see the mix here. We worked hard to make sure to include local and native planters for that. Goal of this is to be fast growing, to very quickly reduce and minimize any sort of view shed impact. And we went ahead and did some visual renderings of what this is actually going to look like for people within the community. So visualizations, here we go. These are kind of cool. We did 3 different spots. 2 of them are along Secretary's Road, and we'll go through each one of them. For each site, we did three time periods. You know, we have a status quo picture. What does it look like right now? What's it going to look like after it's been built? What's it going to look like 5 years in? And then what's it going to look like at maturity? And we did that for these several sites. Viewpoint 1 is just an indicative spot. Viewpoint 2 is actually the biggest overarching viewpoint of the entire site. And so that's, you know, it's a hill that kind of looks over, because we want to build on south facing slopes for these projects. This hill looks over the array. So we chose that as kind of the most impacted view shed point at all. And then we also went down just above the Mount Ida winery, which is here to the south, and stood on the edge of the property in winter, by the way, to make sure that there was no greenery on, or no foliage on the trees, to be able to show what that's going to look like from that edge. So here we go. This is right after construction. If we stand right at this viewpoint 1, right along Secretary's Road, this is what it looks like right now. After construction, this is the proposed view shed. You can see the panels in the back behind here, but not too many of them. This is after 5 years, some growth that you see. And then after, or at mature height, you know, 15 years in, this is what you'll see. There's a minor view shed impact, but you're gonna have to crane your head pretty hard as you drive past that spot on Secretary's. This is viewpoint 2. This is the biggest view shed impact of the whole area. As you can see, the panels are certainly proposed. The proposed panels are certainly visible from this area. That said, they look better than the cut out of ground, and it's not crazy. They're not tall. They're low lying. They're not distracting. I don't know if any of you have driven through the Midwest, but there are wind turbines everywhere out there. Those, especially at night with the flashing red lights, are something to behold, to say the least. These panels, you know, they only do anything during the daytime. And so there's going to be no lighting associated with them at night. This is dark sky. This is not going to have any impact on anyone. We also submitted with our application a glare analysis that shows that, and the FAA actually requires that we conduct a glare analysis. We included that in our application. Shows that there's no glare impact from these because they're facing south. They're not facing the way anybody's going to be driving. These are going to be facing away from where we're at. That's straight up right after built condition, assuming that we built, I think next spring, something like that, using the current vegetation cover. That's after 5 years. As you can see, the initial tree buffer has started to grow up, as well as behind that is that these kind of evenly spaced trees in the back are that screening buffer that I was talking about. At maturity, visual impact is going to be negligible. You won't see anything as you drive through this area. And for kind of a proof of concept, if you ever drive along Secretary's Road, I'm just going to go back here. Oh, sorry, bear with me. Drive along Secretary's Road right here, close to Polecat. It's not Polecat Lane. It's something like Polecat Lane. There's about a 10-year growth set of trees right in this area. Take a look at that and you'll see how quickly and densely these tree screening buffers grow in. And that's what's going to be surrounding this just naturally. We're going to put an additional screening buffer behind it. So that's viewpoint 2. The last is this is standing at the south part of the site, just above the Mount Ida Winery, looking up. This is, as you can see, middle of the winter, so the trees have no leaves or foliage. The blue is actually where the panels are proposed, and then this is to show what if there were a screening buffer planted there, where that would be. Point is, you can't see anything from this area. This is just an indicative point of somewhere taken along Secretary's Road. As you drive by, it's not any special viewpoint. It's just if you were driving by, what would the panels look like? You can see a little bit. You can see the fence proposed around them. By the way, I forgot to mention, the project has to have a fence around it per National Electric Code. It's a 6 or 8 foot, depending on what the county would prefer. Chain link fence de facto. We can work on different types of fencing if people prefer. Please reach out to me and let me know if you have a preference on that. But that's right after construction, as it's starting to grow up, as it's completely grown up. And this is an entrance point to the array, as you can see. One other thing, there will be a Knox box provided on all of the entrance point gates that they'll be locked, but emergency services will always have access to those through that Knox box that's included. Here's another just general generic viewpoint.
Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that we have enough time for all the people who are waiting to ask questions. So
All right.
Are you close to the end here?
Almost done. Yep, I'll snap through it here. Sorry about that. Okay, there you go. Visualizations. We've seen it. Timeline, as I mentioned, we're in the early on in the process. Earliest the construction could start. It would be crazy if it were next year. Odds are it'll be the year after. Let me know if you have further questions about that. This is sort of some of the stuff. I've had several conversations with several community members already. I think I've addressed pretty much all of these already. Can the site be hunted still? What are noise levels? How about environmental impacts? One thing, how to ensure that the project is built according to standards. County zoning, there's a few answers to this. County zoning can always be called to enforce any condition that the county puts on us. That, in addition to that, we're hoping to work to set up a community foundation with various members of the community who live nearby, who actually will have input and say on how this gets built and then be able to monitor it. Very important is that and I don't think I mentioned this, before any construction happens, and as part of our application, we submitted a decommissioning plan that estimates the cost of how much it'll cost in today's dollars to decommission the site and take it out. Before we can build, we have to provide a bond equivalent to that amount so that the county has, if God forbid, Hexagon were to go belly up, county has cash on hand to remove all of this and restore the site to a grassed area. That will be revisited every 5 years to make sure it stays current, not just in today's dollars, but in future dollars. I think this is an opportunity for us to progress and to do really well. I was mentioning the sheep. I'm looking into our current site plan proposes a fescue clover mix around the panels. I'm looking into other alternatives to try and use even more native grasses. If sheep get introduced, that's a different kind of conversation. I'm talking with the Ravenna Conservation Alliance about how to help maintain water quality and start doing early water quality monitoring. Let's see, I think that's all I'll do for now to give some time for people to speak. I'm sorry for the long conversation, but thank you for bearing with me. There's a lot to this, and thanks for hearing.
Thanks, Scott. It is a large and complex project, so thank you for going through that. I would like just to get a rough idea of how many people are interested in asking questions or providing input versus just listening. So If I could ask the attendees to just at the bottom of your Zoom screen, please click that raise hand button if you have a question or some input you'd like to give us a rough idea of how many people are hoping to have time to speak.
We have Mr. Jim Allen who would like to speak.
Just looking to get an idea. So we've got 4.
All right.
5, 6. Okay. I think we're in good shape. And I'll just say to everyone, if on the odd chance that most everyone wants to speak and we get short on time, if necessary, we can find a way to set up an additional meeting for more input. But I think with the number I see raising hands now, we should be able to get through it tonight. So why don't we go ahead and try that? So yeah, Vivian, if you will go ahead and just start calling the names of the people who have their hands up, then we'll go with that.
Yes, we have Mr. Jim Allen.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sitting here with another family that's just across the Secretary's Road here. So they have questions as well. I have to say, I've got about a dozen questions. I know I won't be able to ask all of them, so I'll probably do just a few of them right off the bat. First of all, will we be able to get the slides for both of these presentations? Are both of those available?
Mine certainly is, yes.
Yeah, we can send the slides to Scott to distribute as well.
Definitely want that. So secondly, so it's kind of starting from ground zero. A lot of this is, and we heard a lot about the groundwater, about the reclamation and how this is going to look so much better than it has before because it's been commercially logged and all this sort of stuff. I've lived here for 25 years and I've gone through 3 different loggings, you know, up and down Island Drive. Probably the most annoying part of it is the dust that comes from the trucks that drive down, and as well as maybe the trucks driving too fast with fully loaded and when they're not fully loaded. But you know, when after they've logged those things, they've replanted them, the trees grew back very quickly. Some of the things you would never know that they'd been harvested within the last 5-10 years. Now, the place across the way south of Secretary's Road, I don't know what in the hell happened there. Somebody did something to sabotage that property because it is in an appalling shape. I don't know how they got there that way, but it seems almost as though they did that because they wanted to clear that property so that something like this would come in. So I'm a little dubious of that. And, you know, if there's anything that could be added about that, but probably my other big question is we talk about how, you know, this is going to, a lot of the efforts to limit the damage to the people that live here. Well, first of all, we're not getting much benefit. Lots of people are getting benefits out of this who are not in this area. The people that do live in this area are not getting the benefits. We live just across from Island Drive. We have a 2-story house, probably 30 feet is where the upstairs window is. You're talking about how the trees block sunlight, and therefore they're going to end up you want to limit the size of those trees. Well, that's going to make it so that we end up getting glare, particularly most likely in the afternoons, particularly in the summer. That is not a very good position for us. And you know, you say that this is that the solar cells, and I don't know, are you going to put batteries back there someplace? If you are, I mean, those things are made from, if I'm not, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, toxic materials. They are, you know, where their mined is done oftentimes by you know, child labor. They're manufactured by slave labor and the like. But the thing about it is that, you know, you say that they're not toxic. Well, what are they made of that they can actually do it? And what I mean, to make them work? What are the chemicals that are in them? And how are you going to, I know you say that you've got the, what is it, the bond to try to recover the properties when they're all done, but that'd be in 35 years. Well, if it's 35 years, won't we need more energy instead of less energy? So we're going to take this one down. Where are we going to put it? And if we were going to put it someplace else, why not do that now instead of in this place as you're proposing here? I'm sorry for being rather aggravated about this, but you're really hitting quite close to home. We put our house is here. It's on a bit of a knob on top of a hill, which is actually quite a benefit when it rains, because we don't have water flooding our crawl space. Now, because you're going to put a solar field right across the street, that becomes a liability instead of an asset.
I am. Are we still going?
Yeah, well, my neighbors, Pat and Sal Almeida, want to add something as well.
We have lived here for 22 years, and that property that they've shown that look like, as our county representative said, someplace on the moon, was never like that. What they came, Mr. Purcell and his brothers, in order to make it with attractive and deceiving, put herbicides down for the last couple years and destroyed that. It destroyed some of our trees. It destroyed the creeks that you spoke about with those herbicides, went into the creek, which goes into the Hardware River, which goes down to the James River. That area that you're saying looks so terrible never looked like that. The area here was beautiful with the pines, and prior to the Purcell brothers trying to get all this additional money from all the incentives for green energy, is not going to benefit any of the people here. It will lower our home value, our quality of life. With the panels, the reflection off of it, if it's 90 degrees like it will be tomorrow, 93, 95, it will be like 115 here. Also, the fact that there is a hunting club, well, Mr. Purcell won't renew their license, so the hunting club will be gone. Every reading I have will totally get rid of a good part of the natural habitat for the animals that live here, especially the birds. And I believe that's why California turned down the petition to put their solar panels up. That reflection, depending where those panels are being tilted, could affect each and every person. And yes, there is EMF radiation, not in the solar panels, but definitely in the transmitters. And yes, there are effects of it to local people. Any reading I have done said that any person with an existing condition better move out. Our health is involved. Our properties, our nature, our wildlife are terribly involved. And it's by deceit. By the deceit of the Purcell brothers showing those pictures of property that was never like that before. But they want to make it part of the
sale pitch.
Deceitful sale pitch. And as far as trees, they'll go on fire. You're in any place that you show pictures of of the trees, they're not really near it. Most of the solar panels are completely on desolate grounds. And no, the stuff to keep maintenance of these panels is toxic. And you will never have sheep there. Or you will have radiated sheep there. This is all deceit to make everything look beautiful at the expense of our neighborhood, at the expense of the wildlife, at the expense of the poor people that are underrepresented. We don't have, half of them don't have internet capability. This is wrong. This needs to be stopped, especially by the Scottsville Town Supervisor and anybody on the Albemarle board. Even though it was presented to me, we're rural, we're people too. Residential, we're not in an urban area. That's baloney. There are a lot of people here. And a lot of people are moving, did move here because of the beautiful landscapes, winery, wildlife. You're just gonna wind up disbanding that hunting club. Wildlife won't be here. They hunt birds. The birds won't be here. They only do this during hunting season. And by the matter, there are, even if you disband that hunting club, there will be people that are targeting practice on their own property. What happens when those solar panels get a bullet in them? What happens if our maintenance people are the Dominion Power Company that underserved our area and lied to us about our power in the past? And that is on county record. Thank you.
Before we go to the next speaker, Scott, I want to give you the opportunity if you want to respond to any of those questions or concerns.
Thank you very much for sharing, Mr. Allen and Ms. Almeida. Accusations of deceit hit me heavily, and I hope to never act deceitfully. And you know, I hear the concerns you're raising, and that resonates. I hear what you're getting at. There's a lot there. If you would have time at some point for me to even be able to come out, look and see the view shed you've got, I would love to make myself available to be able to do that. I truly, I really don't want this to be something that harms people. I do think there are good answers for each question you raised. A couple of them that came up continually was that the hunters will be gone. I can actually patently say I've already worked out in writing with the Purcell brothers, who I know are their own characters and do things the way that they do them. I've worked out in writing that the hunters will maintain their lease. They will not be kicked off. They are absolutely going to maintain access to this site. And I've spoken with Mr. Spradlin a number of times about this, and he's supportive of the project because he sees this as a chance for the area to maintain a rural character and not have houses built where they would no longer be able to hunt. That's one point. Another that's come up is this spraying. Yes, the site was hit with I don't know what the pesticide was. They did that last summer. If you believe that I'm being deceitful, then I suppose nothing I say may convince you otherwise. But ma'am, I had no idea that was happening. I was excited about this project because I saw it as a way to keep that from happening. That is the Purcell's standard practice at their sites across the state. Maybe it hasn't historically been, but I know now that is within the Virginia code of how they're able to operate. Maybe they did it trying to think that they were going to be able to make this look worse. I don't know. I didn't have that conversation, and I didn't find out that they had sprayed it until after I got the results of our wetland delineation. I'm truly sorry that happened. That is not something that I wanted to see. Not something I wanted to see. As you mentioned, that damages the groundwater, that hurts the plants, that hurts the animals. That's something I don't want to have happen. You know, what I do want to have happen is habitat reestablished and biodiverse habitats for critters to live in and to thrive in. I hope what you were able to see, and if you look at this, there's a lot of habitat. I was walking around one of these fences of a different array that was built recently, and I don't know if it was a groundhog or something had dug a hole under the fence and had made himself a nice little home inside around the panels. There's there's a lot of habitat available here. And, there's a lot here. I understand it's very emotionally charged. Please know that I in good faith, want to be able to work and help. And, you ask what's in this directly for the community. Tell me what you'd like. Maybe there's things that I can do. There's funds maybe that we could set up, community foundation, or if there's additional screening or something you'd like. I have some flexibility about what I can do to help make this work. But I do hear your concerns and take them seriously and hope that good answers can be provided. But that's a high level answer to your questions.
Alrighty, thank you. Vivian, who's next on the speaker list?
We have Brion.
Hi there. I don't know if you can hear me. Brian is the
Oh,
name.
sorry.
That's okay. Scott, met you once out near the property, and I appreciate you're taking the time to do this, and I appreciate your willingness to listen to the neighbors and the community to try to make this a project that will work for everybody. I share a good deal of the environmental concerns that everybody's talked about, but I hinted to this to you when we met, that one of my concerns is from the ownership aspect of the project, because as I understand it, Hexagon is a developer. And as we all know, developers come in and build something and then they move on and somebody else actually owns it. So my concern is you've got great plans. How well are those going to be incorporated in documentation that will force whoever actually turns out owning the property at some point, that they can maintain the property like you're suggesting, that they will do all the things that you say they will be done on the site. I know you can't guarantee that, but we need to have some sort of assurance from the county, from you guys, from whoever it is, that down the road, 5-10 years from now, that all the things that you propose to do will actually be getting done. So that's my concern, and hopefully that will be what you can be able to promise us.
Hey, Brian, good to hear from you. Thank you for the comments, and thanks for listening to me drone on for a long time this evening. Yeah, I've actually been putting a lot of thought and spoke with I actually met with some of the county staff members recently from zoning and from engineering. A lot of thought into how to actually make sure that what we propose, and let's say if it gets approved, how that gets enforced. And there's a few layers to this. First off, there's straight up just the county zoning code and zoning team. If you as a community member see something that's in violation of zoning, you can call them, they can come out, or they will come out, check that it's in conformance. If it's not, they shut us down if we don't fix it. So we have to fix it. So you have kind of just automatically the built-in starting setup. But what I hear and what I would also be interested in, where I'm in a similar position, is there anything more that we can do? And what I've kind of thought about doing on some of the other projects I've worked on, and I think you and I talked about the idea of some sort of foundation for the immediate community that has a board that has direct access, formalized direct access to the crew that's going to be operating and maintaining the site, that you have a formal connection to them as well as to the county that's formalized, and you can effectively form a neighborhood watch for the array. What I'd love to see with that too is if that foundation was interested in doing any sort of environmental, not environmental, but plantings, testings, or gardening around panels and arrays and in certain areas of it. I'd love to see that foundation serve that sort of role. I think, and somebody from county staff or legal, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's a built-in enforcement mechanism with zoning, but I'd like to offer something additional to that, which would be some sort of, I don't know how to set up a foundation. I don't know what would be involved with it, and that has its own set of issues. But if that's something you guys would be interested in, I've already floated the idea to a few of my colleagues and superiors, and people are receptive to it. So I think that's something we would like to do and be very open to. to make sure that, you know, whatever is in the site plan, whatever's in a condition is enforced for the well-being of the community there.
And I can add, and Scott Clark can certainly chime in and confirm, but any conditions of approval, if the special use permits are approved with those conditions of approval, those conditions and obligations will be binding on any future owner. So it's not just if Hexagon, you know, they'll continue to be in place and enforceable by the county forever unless they're amended or until the project goes away. So if that helps address that particular question.
That's correct. Those conditions would be enforceable through that same zoning mechanism that Mr. Raymer mentioned. Alrighty, in the interest of time, I'll try to just go ahead and get through the rest of the speakers, make sure everybody has a chance to talk. Vivian, looks like Dr. Daniel Sawyer is next.
Yes. Mr. Daniel Sawyer.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, first, Mr. Mullen, a very nice presentation, very thoughtfully done. I would take issue with increasing the tax value, because usually these projects devalue the property values in the vicinity around them. But I do understand, appreciate, and sensitive to the need to try to limit fossil fuels as a means of energy. One of the striking things when you look at the plans, there are homeowners in that piece of Secretary's Road from the visual point 1 to 2 in that piece of road. And I think one of my major concerns is has to do with electromagnetic fields and radiation. We know with the high voltage lines, we associate that with health risks, including multiple myeloma and amyloid. This is much lower radiation, admittedly, radio waves and microwaves, but there are a known risks of health issues for those sensitive to electromagnetic fields that are hypersensitive to it. So my question is, in the panels that generate DC current, the inverters converted to alternating current and the transformers boosted up higher. My question is, where would those inverters and transformers be relative to the homes along that visual site 1 and 2? And what is the degradation of those electromagnetic fields? I know there's a 200-foot buffer, and so do you have any information regarding the amount of radiation from this big project relative to those homeowners between the visual point 1 and 2? And it seems like in that entire tract of 1,500 acres, where there's 200 acres of panels, that it's focused right along Secretary's Road. I know there's access needed to those high voltage lines, but that certainly could be done further away from those homeowners. So that's my concern. But I appreciate the sensitivity with which you presented the project. Very nicely done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, and those are good questions, and particularly coming from from an MD, it matters to hear about people's health. So I appreciate you speaking up and being willing to provide some insight. I will have to find, I don't know off the top of my head what the radiation drop off is on any of these things. The inverters that we're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, panels are 200 feet away from any property line. The inverters are 500 feet interior. One good way to think about this is there's inverters like this that sit along residential roads all the time that we spend a lot of time going by. Like if you ever drive by one of those green boxes along the side of the road, that's the same kind of thing as what we're proposing here. And each of these gather for a subarray. They're set far back. We have extended and immense experience with people living around these things. That said, I'll have to talk to my engineering staff to try to find some documented facts about it that I can easily provide kind of what that drop off is immediately. And my understanding, and again, I need to do a little more research, is that it's a logarithmic drop off, so that, if you're right by it, maybe you have more electromagnetic fields, sort of like your microwave. But even a few feet as you step off, it precipitously drops. And I don't know if any of the engineering staff on can speak to that a little bit better. I can find some studies. I know we've done them and we've had them done. Then speaking to your question about being near to some of those homes, I'm sensitive to that. And actually, I went out right after we submitted this application. I went out to those homes. The majority, I didn't get hold of everybody there that day, but the majority, I went out and actually knocked on doors and talked to several of those neighbors and said, hey, I know this is somewhere close to where you guys are going to be living. I wanted to make you aware and get some feedback. And I did get to speak to 4 or 5 folks, and they were generally supportive of it. I was very grateful for that, because I think we were able to look and see what's actually involved with it, and where it is and what steps are being taken. I will do some research on the inverter drop off. I know we have a study somewhere. I just don't remember its results, except that it is within the distance that we're proposing. It's minimal and negligible. But thank you, sir, for your questions. I appreciate it.
It sounds like there's some later feedback can be on that to get a better answer. And thank you for being willing to do that. We still have 4 people who are left who want to speak. We've kept everybody a good half hour past what we said we would in the original agenda. So I don't want to hold people longer than they're willing to stay or keep them away from other things. So I don't want to just cut things off right here, but I'll just say, let's see how quickly we can get the concerns out. And I don't want to rush anyone, but let's just see how long it takes. If it seems like we're going to take, another 15 minutes or half an hour, we may want to consider setting up a later session for people to have their chance to speak. But let's just see how we do on these remaining 4 people and see if we can get some quick answers.
Okay, we have Tim next that wishes to speak.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, Tim and Linda Watkins, Turkey Run residents. We've been here about 14 years. I really have a couple of questions, but I'm just one that I'll just ask right now. If anybody been a resident here longer than about 5 or 6 years, you'd see that the power lines that you're going to feed into with the solar arrays, if you were here 5 years ago, those were about 60 feet high. Dominion beefed them up at that point to well over 100 feet. Impacting the view shed of a number of people, us included. Is there going to be a necessity to further beef up those power lines in order to carry the amount of power that's being foreseen here for Albemarle County? That's one question. That's really the only question. I will make an observation. You've heard this basically as far as a cost and benefit. There's folks here who are concerned that as much benefit is going to be provided by this, that we're the ones going to be bearing the cost of it, both in the potential reduction of our property values just by being near utilities such as this, for potential resale of our homes, and also I think you might hear, if you ask anybody who lives in this Woodridge area about their power that Dominion provides us, it was alluded to by one of our neighbors earlier in this conversation, is that we've got just about the most antiquated, poor delivery of power anywhere in this county. Is there any potential for this to include an improvement of our direct power infrastructure that could help us, actually get something out of this? And that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I'll be really quick in my response. In terms of the power poles related to our project, no, there will need to be no upgrade. The project is able to fit on the poles as is. That said, and I just have to say what I've heard and what I'm seeing. I have heard rumor from Dominion, independent of this project, that they may try to upgrade those lines. I don't know if that means taller towers. I don't know what that means. That honestly doesn't help us at all, because that means we have to have a bigger system to interconnect. This is from what I've heard, 5 or 10 years down the road. I don't know exactly, but I've heard rumors of it. That will happen independent of our project one way or the other. It may happen. I don't even know, but I just want to be clear up front that, you know, if this gets built and then the lines get upgraded, but I said it won't get upgraded because of our project, that'll look like I knew what I was saying. I don't know, but I've heard rumor of that, and that is disconnected from our project. In terms of helping to strengthen the power delivery system, I'm going to just have to give you a big I don't know. I would love to look at that. Like I mentioned, we have some flexibility to help make the community, to benefit the community. And I've seen a variety of different things done at different projects. And if I've heard, you're not the first person who's mentioned the lack of reliability in the area. Maybe there's something I can do with Dominion to work out more resiliency. Speaking in something I don't know about here, so I'm going to have to do a little research, but that would be something I'd like to look into, and I will. So that's all I've got for you on that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. So let's go on to the next speaker.
We have Miss Carol Carter.
Hi. My concerns are really that this installation that will be beneficial in terms of getting us away from fossil fuels is being borne by the real close neighbors to it, and potentially devaluing their property value, et cetera. We've heard about that. And so, you know, that is a core concern of mine, that the local neighbors are being impacted and bearing the burden of this for the benefit of others. That's one thing. But I do appreciate your sensitivity and your thorough presentation, Scott. And your clearly you are interested in doing the right environmental thing. The other real core concern that I have is water and water quality. And I don't know, you know, I haven't heard much from you except like these conceptual stormwater catchment areas or treatment areas. What exactly are you envisioning for those? Because that's really quite key to the project downstream. But so my two things are, you know, I hope that something can happen to either, I don't know, compensate the neighbors, lower their tax base, I don't know what, but also stormwater quality.
Hey, Carol, thank you. Appreciate the feedback. I'll be real quick. I hear the concern about the neighbors. Of course, I'm a developer advocating for this project, so you're gonna take what I say with a grain of salt. We did do a number of match pair analyses across the state to see what the impact on property values is from these projects. We came back, and again, this was a study done. We came back showing no significant result. I took that with a grain of salt, that answer, because it seems intuitive to me that there may be some sort of impact value. That said, the numbers we looked at that we had performed by a third party, and I'm happy to provide this report, showed no negative impact value. Additionally, when I drove out to the Shannon Hill site the other day, I had pulled my truck off to the side to go look at it, and a guy stopped by and asked, you know, you okay? And I was like, oh yeah, just checking this out. And I asked him, hey man, do you live in this house nearby, right by this array? He was like, yeah, I do. I just bought it, just bought it a year or two ago, and the project had been there 4 years. And I said, how do you like it? Is it a problem? And he said, to be honest with you, I love it. It's a quiet neighbor. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't bother me. There's no impact. Nobody else is going to be able to move in here and change the character of the area. And so he had just bought it and was very happy living next to it. He did offer to serve as a reference, actually, if anybody's curious or interested in talking to somebody who is currently and actively living. And, I don't want to just hand them out left and right, but if you do really have a concern of what it's like to live next to these things, I'd be happy to make a connection there. In terms of the stormwater, it's conceptual right now. The idea, what we've set up currently is, as I was saying, it's kind of a baseline. It meets the bankable requirements and the DEQ will meet the DEQ requirements of of retention ponds that then moderate runoff and stormwater quality. What I would say, in addition to that, we're looking at some creative swales, like every 7th row, putting a creative swale in that helps minimize the earthwork that needs to be done. We're trying to do some creative stuff with it. That said, right now the channeling out there is really bad, and it's not going to get better without something. So it seems to me that baseline of where we're going to, anything with any sort of, regulated, reasonable DEQ certified stormwater will be an improvement over where we're at. But just so you know, our heart is actually to go further. And our director of engineering has been talking to a couple of local environmental engineers and wetland restoration folks to figure out how we can work on that. Thanks for the question.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Vivian, can we go on to the next person, please?
Yes, we have Black Wings.
Yes, David Weber here. I'm a resident of Turkey Run. I have a few questions here. First one, I'm a little skeptical. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, yes. I don't know if you heard my introduction. Dave Weber and Turkey Run. Few questions I have here. One, I'm a little skeptical of the purported capacity of this solar array project. I've noted a number of installations across the country that advertise a certain capacity but fail to generate the electricity at the levels that they were designed to support, particularly because the sun doesn't shine every day, even in installations out in the West. So I'm curious to know the details about the efficiency of this array that's being proposed. Is it 138 megawatts at 80% efficient or 100% efficient? Second question, where are you sourcing the solar panels and other associated equipment? Are they domestically produced, or are these panels coming from China? And as somebody previously commented, a lot of the materials and production of panels take place in places like China, using child labor or forced labor. So I'm curious what ground rules are being established for where the materials are being sourced for this array. And I'm as a resident of Turkey Run, and you've heard it from several other people, obviously concerned about the impact on the property values for our neighborhood and the marketability of our properties should we want to sell. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your questions. Yeah, you're right. When I say 138 megawatts, the way to think about that is nameplate capacity. That's sort of like having a 400 horsepower engine. It doesn't produce 400 horsepower all the time. That's what it's built to spec out to. A lot of the time, it's producing a different amount. So when I say the 25,000 homes power equivalent to that, that means the power generated over the each day, the amount of kilowatt hours produced, because you have your megawatt, that's the capacity, and then you actually have the units of energy produced, which are called megawatt hours, kilowatt hours, watt hours, whatever unit you want to actually work in. That's summed up to get to that 25,000 homes. Yeah, this is not a nuclear plant, right? A megawatt of a nuclear plant is 100% megawatt production all the time. You want my personal opinion? We need a lot more nuclear plants to actually make a difference in our long-term climate goals. And there's some really exciting stuff happening that we can have a different conversation. This is a step in a direction in terms of clean power production that produces during the daytime. So you're astute to observe that. And yeah, that's correct. It's not 100% production all the time. It produces it during the daytime, and it produces more on a sunny day than it does on a not sunny day. So it's a source of power. The question you asked about where are these sourced from? It pains me that unfortunately most of the panels right now are not sourced from the US. I wish they were, and in a future life, that's kind of what I want to work on, is helping reintroduce a lot more domestic capacity here. The fact is, a lot of these are sourced either from Southeast Asia, originally from China. There's some tariff stuff going on there. So Southeast Asia, India, a lot of these are made in different places. Your comment about child labor, which wasn't the first one brought up, is really important. And where we're seeing because I did a little research on this, that's not on the panel production. Panel production is a pretty routine mechanized process. Lithium ion batteries, there have been some pretty bad players from what I've seen and heard in this whole industry so far. And there's a cost to it. And I think we need to get that cleaner. Ultimately, I would like to incorporate battery storage onto this site because that's going to be critical to actually reaching a clean energy future. That's not part of our plan right now. If and when we do that, that'll be next to the substation, interior to everybody. And in a few years after, God willing, some of these practices, and I think it's been it's never blown out of proportion. Child slavery is never blown out of proportion. It's not a high percentage of the lithium that gets produced that way. There is some that has happened and it's poisoned the water, and I want to see that get worked out. So it's going to be a few years before we consider battery storage on this. We want to see things working out properly first. But I really appreciate the question, and some of it you get what you want, some of it you work with what you get or with what you've got. And currently production of the panels is done, a lot of them is done overseas, and we will probably work with that. But if somebody's able to get a production plant up and running soon, sign me up. Thank you.
Okay, so Scott, thank you for answering that. Just to clarify for anybody, if there were to be battery storage on the site, since it's not currently proposed, that would require an amendment to the special use permit, which is essentially the same process. So don't worry that that's going to come up as a surprise later. That would require another county review. We've got 2 speakers left. Vivian, if we can go to the next person, please.
We have Deirdre.
Hi. Thanks very much, Scott, for coming out and talking to us. And also thank you. Other folks have said a thoughtful presentation, and it is a thoughtful presentation. And I know it's hard to balance everybody's interests, and you're doing a really good job of being open to all these viewpoints. My questions tonight are kind of, well, my biggest concern about the project has always been the size. And the reason I'm so concerned about the size is because it just doesn't seem to, number one, fit the neighborhood. And I saw that was in the county 20-year plan to try to make things fit the character of the neighborhood. And it just seems industrial, and we're rural, but we're not industrial. So that is a concern. The other concern about being so big is that if something were not to go right, it would be really hard to change, because you're making decisions and movement on a project on a really big scale. And if all of a sudden something needs to be tweaked, it could be hard to, if you're working on a small project, you might actually have a chance to make some changes along the way. But having been a recent experience of being involved in a construction project, I know that things get a life of their own. And it's hard sometimes to take a thoughtful evolutionary approach. And this one is a really big project, and I think it needs that thoughtful evolutionary approach, even while it's being fixed, because the land does need to be fixed, and the solar panels may very well be the highest and best use for the property. But it's not necessarily going to go according to a plan we draw up before we start working. And your company, as sensitive as you're all being, you haven't done projects this big so that you can say, no, relax, neighbors. We've done this. It's not our first big time rodeo. It's our 150th big time rodeo. And we know how to do this. So I like the cautionary moving slowly bit. And one of my thoughts about how to do that might be to phase the project. I'd still like it smaller, but to do a little bit at a time and make sure it's coming online right, and make sure the land is responding properly, and the solutions that we're trying to put in place are actually solving the problems. So I'm interested in the phasing possibility. The last bit is you talked about restoration, but embedded in that restoration, I know is there's certain things that can't be restored, right? You can't deal with the wetlands at all because that's not part of the right you have. You have to just stay away from them. So is the whole plan to just stay away from the wetlands and let them heal themselves? And also that mitten, does that just get left? Or does somebody else come in under the auspices of this project, maybe a restoration arm, and actually try to give those areas a head start so they don't just have to come back from, from being in such terrible shape? So everybody else has good points too. I just wanted to mention those two things. I hadn't really heard them mentioned before. Thanks.
Thanks, Deirdre. I appreciate the input, and you guys have some really thoughtful observations. And okay, let's see. So restoration and phasing were two of the big questions. Phasing, we do plan on doing a phased construction to where, and this is part of our goal here, to where any site area that's disturbed gets all of its stormwater management restored and stabilized before then going on and disturbing a new area. We can't build one little array and then another little array and then another little array and bring each one online independently because of the substation we have to build. That substation is really big and it's really expensive, and it needs a big enough array around it to justify the cost of actually tapping that line. And so unfortunately, it's something of a altogether process. Now, I know it is a really big project. It's not the biggest around the state by any means. I've seen some done well, seen some done badly. Nobody's done 150 of these yet because we're in a new phase of our evolutionary process of creating clean power. What I'd like to kick around, and I ran out of time on the presentation and can talk more, is to set up, and I think this is in line with what you're talking about, maybe even one of the panel areas closest to Secretary's Road, is kind of what I call an experimental array, where we can partner with UVA or William and Mary or whoever else to work on different types of plantings. Like, do tomatoes grow well under these plants, and do cucumbers, or not plants, panels, do cucumbers, and use that to come up with a set of best management practices here in Albemarle that then, if that works and is financeable, this is a 35-year project, there's a lot of time, we can then incorporate that throughout the rest of the site. We have to build the site all together, but I think there's ways we can look at trying to make it work really well and coming up with new and improved best management practices. In terms of your question about the restoration, I'm so sorry, I'm just blanking on the exact, the wetlands restorations. Yeah. Woodridge Solar, Hexagon Energy with Woodridge Solar will not be touching that 100-foot wetland area. That said, that doesn't mean those wetland areas can't be touched, and it doesn't mean they can't be touched through something else. And what we've started doing, this will require cooperation with the landowner, but we've actually already initiated conversations with them about going through and doing a massive stream bank restoration. There's actually a whole separate market for that in terms of environmental credits. And so we've talked to the landowner about trying to work with them to jointly develop wetland restoration completely across the board. It's a lot of area, and our director of engineering, his wife works for a wetland restoration company. They always talk about how they work in, they get 300 or 400 feet, maybe even 1,500 feet of a stream stretch, but that's all they get. So they don't get to work with any of the upstream area or downstream area. So it's kind of a drop in a bucket with limited impact. We've got some really long stream stretches here that there's an opportunity for us to really go in and work with this. And, whether it's through a stream bank restoration program that has a tax credit element associated with it, or working even with a local community foundation or UVA, we're very much supportive of trying to restore these. So that's not coupled to our project, and I can't promise that is part of what's coupled, but there's an incentive to us from a wetland banking credit even to go in and restore those. And so I'm all ears on ways to see those get restored. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Scott. Let's go on to our next speaker here.
Our last speaker is Leslie Curry.
Leslie, if you go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and talk.
This is actually Anthony Arcuri, Leslie's husband. So we are residents of Turkey Run, and I have two questions and then a couple of observations. One question is, how will electromagnetic energy be increased on the existing lines that run across Blenheim Road and the Turkey Run area? And the second question, how does any of this in any way benefit any of the people in our neighborhoods around us? What benefits are there for them with this project? Observations are, you're selling this project because there's investors involved, so it's about money. I'm in that business, so I get it. But what I also see is this end of the county, which I've been living in, this southern part of the county since 2013 in this neighborhood, has been grossly underserved by Dominion. In fact, I'll use the word discriminated against compared to the other parts of the county. We have put in complaints to the state regulatory agency twice now about the number of power outages we have here, which year to date at our home alone is 9 power outages. That's in 2022. We've had to put in a full house generator because we have multiple freezers and working from home and all those types of things. We're not home all the time. We need power here. The project's going to be a definitive eyesore, as Jim Allen spoke for his property, as well as for many other people living here. It's going to decrease home values. And I'm also very concerned about water quality. The herbicide decimation that took place last fall, I lost 7 beehives out of 8 because of that. Never ever had losses like that ever. And I'm very concerned about groundwater because of that. The impact on that going forward. And I'll be quite frankly, I'm very unsupportive of this project because one of the biggest reasons is I don't see any benefit for any of us here. It's going to knock down our property values.
Thank you, Mr. Arcuri. Appreciate hearing from you. A few questions. First, I can't say exactly. I don't know exactly how power flow works. Will this increase the power flow across the power lines at Blenheim Road? It's not going to increase their voltage at all. The current may increase in terms of the amount that's going through, but it'll be, back to maybe what it was before when the Bremo power plant was running. So it's not anything beyond what the lines are designed to handle. Your question about what's in this for the community, like I mentioned, I'd love to try to talk to Dominion. I don't have a lot of sway with Dominion. Dominion does what Dominion does, and it's a frustration for many people on many fronts. But I'd love to try to see what I could do to use this project to help bolster you guys' electric reliability. That's not something I can wave a wand at or anything, but I'll at least try to look into it. I'd like to reiterate earlier what I said. It grieves me that this site got hit with these pesticides. I did not know that was going to happen. I actually thought one of the biggest benefits, what my ace in the hole as I started planning to permit this project back then, was that I was going to be able to keep it from getting bombed. And then the landowners bombed it with herbicide last year. They did it legally, they did it per state regulations, but I sure as hell didn't want it to happen, but it did. The fact that you lost beehives is grievous. I'm very sorry about that. One thing that pops to mind really quickly in terms of benefit, if you'd be willing to take a look at the planting mix that we're proposing, a lot of that is specifically chosen to actually foster bees and butterflies and actually help improve their environment. And I've seen studies that because of the increased bee habitat, blueberry production, berry production, agriculture dependent on bees and pollinators increases by as much as 90% around these arrays once they're built. I hate that this spray got sprayed. I can't really go back and fix that. I had nothing to do with it. I think it dissipates over time. We're going to get a robust bee and butterfly friendly pollinator mix set up. I would love it if you want to actually have full access to any of these areas to actually start keeping beehives in the area. So talk with me. I mentioned I'm going out to a sheep farm tomorrow. He also keeps bees, and he's interested in doing both of those things, sheep and bees around these panels. If you want to jump in on that, I'm all ears. I would love to have that happen. Again, I am sorry for this pesticide. It was news to me. I didn't actually know it happened until after our wetland delineator told us about it. The landowner didn't even tell me. So I'm having to deal with the fallout from that. And, you know, they did it above board per state rules, but it was still something that I did not want to see happen. So yeah, I appreciate your questions. I hear the concerns, and whatever's in my power, I want to help. You know, you say this is an eyesore. Take a look at the visualizations, and maybe if you'd be willing to even come out and see one of these other sites, they're pretty inert, they're pretty low, and with all these plantings we've put around them, I hope and have worked pretty hard to make sure it stays screened. And you asked what the benefit is. You're not going to have this channeling filling up Turkey Run. You're not going to have really low water quality runoff. You're going to have better bee context around it. And you know, these houses are pretty far from this array. This is not going to take up much of a view shed for anyone. And you know, you can challenge me on that, but I'd love to sit down and look at it and say, well, where would this be visible from? What can we do to help mitigate that, so that there is no property impact? You know, other houses being built there, depending on what ends up being built, could have a similar impact. So this keeps out that other kind of development. I really do appreciate your question though, and like I said, to you and to everybody, I live in Albemarle County. I'm here all the time. My wife and I little son are out in Crozang. Call me or email me, and I'll be at your house to talk if you're willing, and even take you on a site tour to really see how bad it is out there and what we're hoping to do to fix it. So thank you all for your time. Very much appreciate it.
Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for taking the time to come out to the meeting or to sign into the meeting tonight. Just like to remind everybody, if you have any questions about the process or need more information, you can email me at sclark@albemarle.org and I'll be happy to help. So thank you again to everyone who took the time to attend tonight. Thanks to the applicants for providing all the information. I believe we've had gotten everybody who wanted to speak a chance to speak, which is great. And again, we'll be here to take your questions if any of you have them. So with that, I believe we're about done. Thank you again, and we'll go ahead and sign off.